Thanks so much for joining us, and welcome to Ideas 42's latest seminar series. My name is Kate McLeod. I'm a principal behavioral designer here at Ideas 42, and I'm excited to welcome you to this webinar. To get started with some housekeeping, the recording will be available and will be shared afterwards, and there should be a Q&A box on your screen. So if you have any questions as we go through, you can feel free to drop them into the box. And we will get to those when we open the floor during our panel discussion at the end. So many of you are likely familiar with Ideas 42 in some sense, but I'll start with a brief background. So what is Ideas 42? We were founded back in 2008 when a group of academics conducting research in behavioral economics began to look for a better way to ensure that their findings were actually applied in the real world in a way that promoted social good. So they dreamed up Ideas 42, which started as a lab at Harvard. And since then, Ideas 42 has grown into an independent nonprofit that uses insights from behavioral science to better understand human behavior and to apply this understanding to create evidence-based solutions that improve lives and drive social change. So we talk about behavioral science, but what does it really mean to take a behavioral lens? This is the standard decision-making model that you might find in a traditional economics class. It's fairly linear. It assumes that we always weigh the costs and benefits of any decision. And if the benefits outweigh the costs, then we would take the necessary action and achieve the outcome that we desire. But as we know, this isn't always the case in the real world. Our behavior is actually much more complicated. When we make a decision, our brains are often processing huge amounts of information, and we can't pay attention to all of it, so it can be difficult to successfully weigh the costs and benefits. Cues from our environment or the context that we're experiencing might impact our decisions, or we might not even make a decision at all. And when it comes to taking action, our behavior is often influenced by the context. We might consider things like, what are those around us doing? Or how difficult is the action, and can I put it off until later? And all of this impacts if and how we get from our decision to the expected outcome. But behavioral science helps us to understand what features of the context are likely to influence our path from making a decision to achieving an outcome, and how those features of the context might influence our behavior. And with that understanding, we can develop programs, systems, and policies that account for how we behave in the real world. So today we're here to talk about some of the work on cash transfer programs that we've been doing at Ideas 42. Overall, cash transfers are an evidence-informed way to reduce poverty and improve livelihoods, and they're widely used and have seen rapid expansion over the past few years. But these programs have limited resources to help the hundreds of millions of people who are experiencing extreme poverty. So in our work, we've found that recipients often have longer-term financial goals that they want to use their transfer towards, goals such as starting a business or investing in their children's education. But they report that they face challenges in consistently using or saving the resources that they receive through the transfer to achieve those longer-term goals. So in our work, we've found that there are many behavioral barriers that might be contributing to those challenges. In addition, what we know from the behavioral science research is that experiencing poverty often means living in a state of chronic scarcity. And living in a state of chronic scarcity in any form, whether that be funds, as in this case, or time or any other resources, can be a drain on a person's mental bandwidth and attention, which can further exacerbate other challenges that they might be facing. So with insights from behavioral science, we've been working to enhance the effectiveness of cash transfer programs, ultimately supporting them in best using their limited resources to reach even more individuals and households. So how have we been applying behavioral science to cash transfers? Since 2015, Ideas 42 has been partnering with the World Bank and country governments in 10 countries so far to incorporate behavioral science into their cash transfer programs. We've been working on programs that have a variety of focuses, but many fall into these two main themes of productive inclusion or human development. In each of these countries that we've been working in, we've worked to identify the barriers that recipients are facing to using their cash in line with their goals and to design solutions to address them. So we found numerous common behavioral barriers across the programs that we've worked on. And these are just a few examples of the barriers that we found recipients were facing. We found that they often have these long-term goals, but they face challenges in meeting those goals due to the salience of immediate needs, such as debt repayment and medical expenses when they receive their transfer. Budgeting between these two important buckets is difficult for anyone, but it can be even more challenging when people are experiencing chronic scarcity. We also found that spending immediately after the transfer, for example, at local markets that pop up near the disbursement site, is a highly visible act, while other actions like saving and investing are less visible and happen in private. And this can lead people to believe that saving and investment is not the norm. We also see that some programs may be advertised as for the poor, or specifically note that they target people who are experiencing poverty. And this can reinforce recipients' identity as a person who's experiencing poverty. In some cases, this might exacerbate stereotypes, evoke feelings of loss or control, or even limit recipients' aspirations for what they can achieve with their transfer. In addition, programs might not make it clear how much multiple cash payments could accumulate to and add up to over time, which makes planning and saving towards longer-term goals even more challenging. Payments are often received as a single stack of bills or as one large deposit, which can foster the perception that the payment is meant for a single purpose, rather than the perception that people can allocate the money for multiple different purchases, such as immediate consumption, as well as saving and investment. And finally, we see that while many recipients want to start or grow income-generating activities or businesses, there can often be ambiguity around when and how to do so. And so that may lead to them relying on previous experience or relying on their observations about what other people around them are doing, instead of taking actions that are beneficial and well-suited to their specific context. So we worked closely with our World Bank and government partners to design solutions to address these barriers. And these solutions are always customized to the context in which they're delivered. But design ideas have included text message reminders to help recipients keeping their longer-term goals top of mind, social norms posters that help make social norms around saving and investing more salient, self-affirmation activities that work to reduce stereotype threat, goal setting and plan making tools that increase the salience of total earnings and provide recipients with scaffolding to make a plan to achieve their long-term goals. And partitioning tools, sometimes in the form of money pouches, that provide recipients with a physical way to separate the cash that they mentally accounted for different priorities when they were making their plan. And the final example here is behaviorally informed tools to support planning for how to start and open a business. We've been working to build a body of evidence through rigorous randomized controlled trials on the effectiveness of these designs. And in each of these trials, we've been testing a control group who receives their cash transfer as normal against a treatment group who receives their cash transfer plus the behavioral interventions. This is just a sample of the positive impacts found from these designs on a variety of outcomes. I won't go into too much detail because we want to focus this session on scaling, but I'll have my colleagues share our evidence hub either in the chat if that's possible, or we will follow up with it where you can further dig into these results. We also aimed to measure cost effectiveness because, as mentioned, our goal is to support cash transfers and enhancing their impact so that the limited resources can go further. And based on our measurements so far, we have found the designs to be cost effective in each of the trials that we've run. So as I mentioned, I won't dig deeper into the results and cost effectiveness today, but this is just a sample of what our evidence hub looks like online. This hub details the designs that were tested, where they were tested, the results, information on cost and cost effectiveness for each of the trials that we've run. And we're more than happy to discuss this further. So please feel free to explore our evidence hub and contact us if you have any questions or if you want to learn more. But with that, I'll shift our focus towards scaling. So we're creating these interventions that seem to be effective and cost effective. But to reach our ultimate goal, these innovations actually have to be implemented at scale. So this is a graphic about innovating and scaling, which I thought was particularly interesting. This figure shows that while innovations can have huge positive impacts at scale, they often require upfront investment. In our work with country governments and with the World Bank, we've put in lots of upfront investment. There have been generous investments from our funders and investments of time and resources from the partners that we've been working with. And now that we have these innovations and that we see that they're impactful in so many projects, we're at a place where we're at this tipping point where we can really move towards scale and realize the positive impact from all of those investments that we've made together. I also wanted to take a moment to recognize the incredibly vast reach of the programs our partners are leading, which is quite unique. The government-led programs that our partners are leading often have huge nationwide reaches, meaning that there is the path to scale to hundreds of thousands or even millions of individuals or households. So this is a graphic based on data collected on economic inclusion programs, which includes some cash transfer programs by the Partnership for Economic Inclusion, which really shows how important these government-led programs are. You can see that while government-led programs account for less than 50% of the total number of economic inclusion programs, they include almost 90% of all participants in such programs. So when we think about the potential impact that this work can have, the potential for positive impact through scaling these is really massive. We have the potential to reach millions of individuals and households through these programs, hopefully ultimately supporting them in reaching their financial goals and exiting poverty. And that, of course, makes us really excited about this work. So we have made significant progress on the path towards scale so far, and we have learned lots of important lessons along the way. Some major successes so far include in Madagascar, where the government is implementing the designs at scale to all of the recipients of a Human Development Cash Transfer Program, as well as in Tanzania, where the government is in progress of scaling the designs up to 500,000 people and has already reached about 200,000. And many of the other programs that we're working on, we're currently having discussions and working with our government partners to incorporate the behavioral designs directly into implementation for new waves or new programs that are being developed. So we're still learning as we move towards scale with many of our partners, but these are some of the insights that we've gained so far on catalysts for scaling innovations with governments. Firstly, it's really important to build buy-in of partners and on multiple levels. Building the buy-in of key decision makers is important so that those key decision makers can advocate for incorporating the designs during key decision-making points. For example, when programs are deciding what activities they're going to include, or when budgets are being developed, determining how resources are going to be allocated. But in addition, we've found it really important to also build buy-in of program staff who are involved in project activities on the ground. These staff are often participating in field activities, and they're able to see how the designs are impacting the lives of recipients. And because of this, their contribution to the creation of the design and how the designs will be implemented is invaluable, since they have really the insights on how implementation works in practice. We've also found that these folks are often become great advocates for scaling the designs. And being really clear and upfront and asking for commitment from these key champions, ideally on both of these two levels, can help teams identify who the best advocates are going to be for this work. We've also found that building ownership over the designs from government stakeholders is necessary for building designs to scale. We've found that building ownership often starts with building capacity, which might happen through workshops, sharing resources, and importantly, actually co-designing the designs together. And when moving from the initial design phase towards the testing and scaling phases, we found that having our government partners take on more ownership of the designs and additional responsibilities at each of the stages, so that ultimately, once we're ready to pilot the designs, our partners are the ones making decisions about and leading the implementation and delivery of the designs, can really foster ownership over the designs and lead to our partners really advocating for scaling up the designs. We also recommend discussing resource constraints early and designing innovations that will fit into those constraints. While behavioral interventions are typically very low cost, that can still add up when scaling them to millions of people. So discussing resource constraints early in the process and keeping abreast of any key decision points within the program or approval stages, such as when budget approvals for new phases might happen, and making sure that the government team has all of the materials they need to advocate for incorporating and scaling the designs during those key activities can be really important in moving towards scale. And finally, ease of integration of the designs into existing programming is really important and can be a catalyst for scale. So where possible, designers or innovators should integrate designs directly into existing programs and processes. And we should always start to think about this from the project inception and creation of the designs. When designing, teams should be thinking about exactly where it will be implemented into the program and how faithfully this design can be delivered and implemented at scale. So finally, before we welcome our panel, I'll just highlight progress towards scale in two unique contexts that we'll have represented. So the first is Tanzania's productive social safety net. So in Tanzania, we worked with the government of Tanzania and with the World Bank to develop behavioral designs to support recipients in saving their transfer to invest in productive activities. And we did a few tests testing this package of behavioral interventions. The last test was a large cluster randomized control trial that was completed in May and June of 2022 last year. Following the completion of that test, the government team was preparing for a new phase of the program, and they decided to then incorporate the nudges into that new phase and incorporate room in the budget to include and scale those nudges. And last fall, the team began to scale those nudges, and so far they've reached over 200,000 recipients. And the other unique context we'll talk about today is Ghana and the Complementary Livelihoods and Asset Support Scheme. And so our work in Ghana with the World Bank and country government aimed to develop behavioral designs to support recipients in saving to start or expand their business. And in Ghana, this is one of the projects we have newer results for. We actually just completed the test for the work in Ghana in March of this year. And so the government and the World Bank are currently in a stage where they're making decisions about if and how to scale the nudges up. So with that, I am very happy to welcome our panel today. We have Tumpe Lukongo, who is the Research and Development Specialist at the Tanzania Social Action Fund from the government of Tanzania. We have Christabel Dadzi, who is a Senior Social Protection Specialist with the World Bank, who has been working on the project in Ghana. And we also have Shagata Datta, who is the Managing Director of the Global Development Focus Area at Ideas 42, who has been working very closely on all of this work. With that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can see our panelists, and we will get into the panel discussion. So as I mentioned, please feel free to drop questions in the chat as they come up, but we'll start with a few questions from our side to the panelists. And so this first question I will direct to our World Bank and country partners joining. So what designs were tested in your program and what is the current progress towards scale? Perhaps we can start with Tumpe and then hand it over to Christabel.
Okay, thank you, Katie. I don't know if it is morning there, but here is evening. So hi all of you. Okay, following the question, I will go direct to the response. In Tanzania specifically, we designed and tested the nudges, which was based on linked with CCT. So the key things, we were trying to help beneficiaries use their benefits more productively. So to help them improve their future livelihood and the outcomes, and also empower beneficiaries in behavioral activities like helping them to set a realistic goal and helping them to make plan, helping them to, because they are getting funds every 2 months. So we help them to kind of have a separating tools and make their own achievement of the goals, make plan of their own achievement. So that is the behavioral nudges we designed and we tested in Tanzania. And the design was not just a design, it was a design which came from a very long time iterative discussion between stakeholders of different levels, iteration discussion with beneficiaries from various contexts. So we came up with various bottlenecks, but we picked very few, and from the bottlenecks, now we came up with the nudge. So after having the nudge, we tested. And after having tested, we started testing slowly. And then we go to the bigger area. And then, you know, when you are having something, you cannot decide to say, I'm going to scale. From what we are testing through the evaluation, it is the one which showed us that these things we are testing is beneficial. So we came up with the strategy on how to now integrate. And from the strategy, we have a small technical group sitting together, discuss. Now we have already tested. The testing is completed, and the viability of the nudges is this. So we now have to discuss how are we going to integrate the nudge into the major components. So the strategy we are tabled to the management, and thereafter we discuss with the other stakeholders during we normally have mission, and after table the decision from the technical team. Now the nudge were aligned into livelihood, where now we distributed into two. Some activities were done during livelihood training, and other activities were now like follow-up done during payments. So now the nudges is, as we communicated in Nairobi, the nudge is about in 68 PAA with 200,000 beneficiaries, and we are now planning to nudge it more in other areas where livelihood component is being scaled up. So back to you, Kate. Thank you.
Thank you, Tumpe. I'll pass it to Christabel next to share the experience from Ghana.
Thank you so much, Kate, and thank you to Ideas 42 for the opportunity to share what we've done together, essentially. So I'm the task team leader for the Ghana Productive Safety Net Project, which is the World Bank's social protection intervention in Ghana. And it's been running since 2019, but had a predecessor prior to. In fact, we've been supporting social protection since 2010. And so when we were contacted, I would say, by a global team to be a part of that pilot with other countries on behavioral changes, it was very welcome because we were trying to figure out innovations towards making our work more impactful. And so the Ghana Productive Safety Net Project funds cash transfers that reaches approximately 350,000 households. It funds labor-intensive public works that has to date reached about 200,000 households with short-term labor. And then in GPSMP, which was initiated in 2018 or 17, I don't remember now, we started productive inclusion. But before then did a pilot, a tiny pilot that was meant for 3,000 individuals to see what to do. And then we scaled up in GPSMP, reaching over 20,000 beneficiaries, 30,000 beneficiaries. Now, what is it that we did? The productive inclusion activity was to provide sustainable livelihoods. As I mentioned, the cash transfers, as you know, is to improve consumption. So it's basic about food. And then the public works is for able-bodied poor people, but it gives short-term labor. So the question becomes, if we're truly going to take people out of poverty, We need an extra element to add that will provide them with sustainable livelihoods and diversification of the livelihoods that they have. So that's where the productive inclusion came in. We started off primarily in the rural areas and focus on life skills training, business skills training. We provide an enterprise training based on an opt-in a variety of income generating activities. So from basket weaving to rice processing to soap making. And primarily our beneficiaries are about 80% women. So once they finish the trainings, all the trainings, you have to attend 100%, then they're given a cash grant of up to, it was initially $200 was the ceiling. Over time, it was increased to $250 equivalent. Now that ceiling is based on a milestone. So you need to develop what we call it an investment plan and not a business plan, because business plan sounds too sophisticated. But it's a very simple document that says, in round one, I'm doing, say, guinea fowl rearing. Round one, I'm going to build a cage and buy feed. Round two, I'm going to actually buy the guinea fowls and do X. And then each one is apportioned with funds that we support the beneficiaries to do. So once they receive the funds, then they start their enterprises. Where Ideas 42 came in, we had a meeting in the UK, I remember this very well, with our cash transfers team and our productive inclusion team. And it was really an eye-opener because at that point, we had a clean slate. Here is this project, here are these opportunities doing different things. Which areas can we change people's attitudes and people's behavior towards building impact? So I remember we discussed public works, for example, and what are some of the challenges there and what are some of the opportunities. We discussed the cash. In fact, we came in thinking that we'll start with cash transfers. And then we went round and round. And I think that process was powerful because it allowed the government team to assess themselves where the opportunities lie. And in most of our projects, I advise, let's start with a pilot and then we scale up. And so we looked at our cash transfers beneficiaries, while they do need support in various ways, because one of our outcomes is for human capital development. We also knew that there's 350,000 of them. It's going to be difficult to start from there. So we decided to pilot behavioral changes through your work through a pilot, essentially, which was the productive inclusion work. And then the next stage was, okay, now that we've decided it's productive inclusion, what are the different opportunities that we can select? Went around in circles, different ideas, things like mills being part of decision making. It was just a lot of things were thrown on a spread down, a flip chart. And then we settled on savings, because that is one big part, evidently, of if you're going to sustain your incomes, you need to save. So once we agreed on that, then the issue became, let's do the research. As you mentioned in your presentation, a randomized control trial was put together, and then the research was done. Now, ownership and buy-in of this process was very important. So this was really the government team understanding that while a research firm is going to come and poke into your work, it is for your own good and what you do with the outcomes. So let me stop here. That's basically kind of the intro around what it is we're doing in Ghana and the work that we're doing with Ideas 42. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. The next question I'll ask is around some of the key factors influencing decision making around scale. So what are some of the key factors that have or still are influencing decision making around scaling the behavioral designs? And on this one, perhaps I will start with Cristobal and then hear from Tumpe, and then we can pass it to Shigato to hear some overarching reflections.
So the Ghana process actually took longer than we expected, thanks to COVID. There was a big gap. But I think what was useful in the gap is it gave us time to understand what it was that we were doing better. And so I'll tell you one thing I appreciated about your team, for example, is when we regrouped to kind of make decisions around the evaluation, they, for example, went back to do a refresher course because they felt like the nudges that they had provided initially, people may have forgotten because there was a time frame gap. Right. And so this allowed us to really be able to tell if the nudges that were implemented are working. And it also allowed our team to really appreciate what was being done and what it means for our beneficiaries. So that's one piece. The second thing also is that right from the onset, when we met in the UK, it was clear that Ideas 42 and the bank are coming in to support with research, tiny pilots, and it's going to be up to the government team to take it to scale. So what that did is it kind of sets the stage for the decision-making of what should happen in the future. And since then, as you know, fate would have it, we have designed future programming. And so in that design, there was thinking around this thing needs to happen. And so then key points here, money allocation was made towards being able to take it to scale, even before the scaling itself was happening. But once we kind of had an opportunity to discuss with the team, the research team, understanding the findings, seeing the elements. I have a picture of the woman with her savings box in my office as a reminder every day of what it is that we're doing, because I met her and it was, I mean, her smile was just amazing, you know, where she's like, look at what I've done, you know? So it was evidence that this is going to be useful to them. Now, while the project gives opportunities for beneficiaries to be part, actually it's a requirement to be part of village savings and loans in organizations, one of the gaps we found there is that they are not always able to give them kind of one-on-one support. And then the trainings that we gave are short-term and very, very high level and, you know, and rapid. So there is only so much they'll learn. So focusing in this extra piece becomes an area that makes it possible to actually make a difference. And then hearing the testimonies of the beneficiaries also kind of seal the deal for us. And so it was, in fact, it wasn't even a discussion of should we, it was more of how should we, you know, because at this point, the decision had already made that this is useful and then moving forward. So currently in the productive inclusion programming that is started, the new project started January 2022. What are we in 23? No, yeah, really 2023. We have incorporated it as part of our first module, which is the training module. So in the business and life skills trainings, they are highlighting the savings components. They're going to do the flyers that were provided. They're going to give the saving boxes with the different checks and all of that to the beneficiaries. And so, you know, it's early stages, but it's pretty much done as a result of the intensive research. So I think I have a good story to share with you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tumpe, perhaps I will pass it to you next to hear the experience from Tanzania.
Yes, thank you, Kate. On the factor that influenced the scaling of the nudges, I would say this starts from the time where Idea 42 approached us. I remember we had a meeting with other government stakeholders, and then if not Attila or Salgato, they came to our office, discussed about the nudges, and then that nudges were dumped to my department in the research and development, and I normally do a lot of pilots. So then we start working with Lois, and then the iterative process, the designing process. I can say that all the process were very sequenced and very it was a sequenced and technical process. And the NAGI team, Idea 42, were willing to take everything issue which seems to be a challenge and they were able to be flexible, maybe to change the material, to redesign, to revise. So all those processes we are drawing lessons for better products. So then the decision now to test, because you now have the material, you test. Then in the process of testing, you are learning, and you are trying to see if beneficiaries are improving. Although you are testing, but you are also learning, but again, you are improving lives of beneficiaries. So all those things, it is getting into people's mind, and the way you communicate back to the team management, wherever you go, you communicate, and we normally have meetings where we kind of give them feedback of what is happening in the fields. And now the decision to go for a bigger scope. And the beautiful thing is now when you evaluate, you get some valid information from the researcher, independent evaluators. They are telling you that when you inject a nudge component, you add some value to what you are giving, because we are also lacking some strategies for graduation, you see. So having something which help people to have a positive attitude and try to involve in something which is meaningful for them to be able to graduate out of program. So the nudge now was a very good opportunity. So you now looking at the stakeholders, when you tell them that we are dealing with some behavioral problem facing beneficiaries, to try to help the program objective. So this helped us to be now the program or the program managers and directors to be able now to say, let us test the nudge, because we tested in the small area and now we want to scale it up. So it was easier for us now to take it up in the bigger program. So those processes was the lessons, the flexibility, the availability of the behavioral science team. Whenever you raise the concern, like Lois was able now to manipulate the design to align with your context, and then try now to go and implement. So that was the key, and it became very simple in terms of integrating it into the media program. Even, we started the implementation before COVID. And then when COVID came, we kind of, the bigger program was having challenges. We are the beneficiary, we didn't have some cash to pay beneficiaries for some months, and then it was very now difficult to reach the community. But after some time, I visited the area. I tried to observe if the beneficiaries still remember the nudges. But frankly speaking, those who received the nudge, the treatment group, were remembering the goal. They were having those like separating tools and so forth, and it was very difficult. So it was difficult for the whole country because of the COVID, but still the nudge has an impact. So to me, I see the way the nudge team, the way we were doing, collaborating, it became easier for us to align in the media program. And I believe, because we are now planning to design the coming phase, nudge will be one of the components. It might be one of the components in under library, because at this moment we are trying to align with the existing implementation intervention within the library. But if it gets its space, and then it has some like longer time for training, and you have enough time to get in touch with beneficiaries, it will have some bigger outcome. So that's what I can share from Tanzania. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tumpe. And I'll pass this to Shigato as well, who's worked on many of these projects across many countries, to hear any reflections on overarching factors that have been a big influence.
I think, thank you, Kate, and thank you, Christabel and Tumpe. It's so nice to see both of you. And I think one thing I was sort of reflecting on as you were both talking, which is a factor that maybe is a bit of a meta factor in getting us to where we are, is the fact that we were able to have this very long-term partnership with the World Bank and with the country governments. And for that, this wouldn't have been possible if we didn't have the kind of funding from the Global Innovation Fund, which was pretty flexible in what it allowed us to do, right? So, you both mentioned the Ideas 42 team's flexibility in kind of adapting to changing circumstances. I think that made the designs much stronger, but it also really helped the government to sort of see the value in what we were doing, to be, on board with what was going on, and really think independently about how to apply them in their programs. And that was really only possible because we were able to work, starting from when this all kicked off, I think, in the original DAR meeting in 2018, and then in London 2019, and carrying on since then through COVID, which has been remarkable. And I mean, I think the only thing I will perhaps add is that this is really, for me, obviously the data and the evidence are extremely important, but I think being involved together with the World Bank teams and the government teams, so that we're all doing this together, was a very important part of what leads to a position where, like as Christabel said, there wasn't even really a question of should we scale. It was really how should we scale this? Like, what should we do, right? And I think that was also true very much of Tanzania, and it's been true of many of the countries where this has led to this kind of success. And I think that's not possible if you don't do this work together from the beginning, so that we've all kind of understood, how did we get here? Why did we do this? What are the other things that this could be applied to? So that's been a very, it's in some ways an obvious lesson, but it's been wonderful to be able to do that. And I think having this consistent Ideas 42 team, led for the most part by Kate, who were really involved in all the countries, right? And so could sort of also take learnings from one country to the other, figure out how to problem solve. And there were so many challenges, right? Because much of this work was done during the initial aftermath of the big waves of COVID. So, we were in a very different world when we were doing this to when we started. But yeah, those are, I think some of the things that have really helped. So a lot of that is, if you notice, is not really about the bit when we're actually getting to scale. It's almost like if we've done all of this in the run up to that and the generation of evidence, the scaling part then really becomes about engaging intensively to make sure the government and the bank have all the information that they need about costs, about materials, about how to produce them, how to distribute them, at what points, that all of this is just very clear, and that it's available at the right time. Because what we've learned is that, programs have life cycles, and they go through iterations, they get redesigned. And those are some of the opportune moments where, if everything is already in place, it still needs a little bit of putting together and all going together and saying, okay, how do we make this happen, right? And I think the more we can position the team and our colleagues at the bank and in our government agencies like TASAF to be in that position to act quickly, I think the more success we'll have at scaling. The last thing I'll say is just that I've, this is sounding like, we ran these, we designed these things, we ran these interventions, we got the data, and we're even scaling. And that's how we always think it should happen. But, kudos to everyone involved here. That is not how it always happens, right? There are so many things that happen in the middle, and we don't actually get to that final stage. And so I think these sets of projects have been some of the most gratifying things I've had the opportunity to work on. And it's been so much fun working with all of you on this. Over.
Thanks so much, Shagato. I'll ask one more question on our side, but I'll also just remind everyone that our Q&A box is open. Please feel free to drop in any questions you have, and after this question, we'll open the floor. But the last question from my side is, what kinds of support or resources would be useful for World Bank and country teams to really continue towards scale and catalyze that scaling process? Perhaps again, we can go for Christabel first, and then Tumpe, and then pass it to Shagato.
Sounds good. I think in some of this you're already doing knowledge sharing, continuous knowledge sharing around what the various countries are doing, what is working, what is not working, allowing the government teams to tell their stories, even possible if you're in a country and can get beneficiaries to tell that story. It really helps to solidify the political economy around this work. So I think that should be continued. Joint blogs, any kinds of communications that we can do that continues to let people understand that this is effective and it's working. Because for example, in the Ghana program, while we're doing the productive inclusion focus now, our goal is to do it through to test nudges in the other components as well. So there's more work to be done over time. So as much impact we can share would be good. Another thing is, I think there's always been an issue around understanding evaluations, and particularly RCTs. So even as we scale up, and it goes around the issue of the control group, having the research with the treatment group is usually not that much of a big deal, but with the control group is always iffy. Like people want to know why they're not going to be giving, the treatment, all of that stuff. And so continuous education in this space, I think, will be useful because we should be continually evaluating the work as we move forward. I think that would be important. The last thing, and then this actually picks from something that Sugatos had mentioned, which is around time, and the fact that, we're telling this amazing story, but there's more stories behind it. But I think a lesson that I learned in all of this is allowing for time. Initially we did start getting quite, what's the word? For lack of a better word, frustrated in terms of things not moving. But I actually look back and I realized that it was a good thing because it allowed us to bring on all these other stakeholders who now are champions for the work we're doing. So I think as we think through scale up as well, we should think about how we just allow for time to do its thing. If it's not the right time, don't push it. Or if you push it, keep trying later on. And then once it becomes a piece of the puzzle that people understand, it will work out. Very lastly, one thing I'll mention, and this has come up already, is the issue of context. And so while we've worked with your team to contextualize the nudges, and that's what we're taking forward. I'm positive that there'll be learnings as we move forward. And so at that time, it'll be great for your team with the capacity you have in this area to be able to inform the government teams whether changes they are making make sense. So staying on as a friend, so to speak, to support in the innovations and the changes over time, I think will be really useful to ensuring that this is as impactful as it can be. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Cristobal. This is all, really useful for us to hear as well as we're thinking about the next steps for all of this work. I'll pass it to Tumpe next.
Okay, thank you. My colleague from Ghana preempted me. But yes, knowledge sharing and increasing the buy-in for stakeholders is also very, very important as we continue to scale. Because for instance, for me, I'm doing a certain pilot and I'm going to also include the nudges. So wherever you do something, you just integrate the nudge because it all depends on what kind of activities you are doing. So when you increase the stakeholders' understanding, they will understand the importance of using the nudge design, because you are trying to incorporate something which will help you to achieve better. The other thing in the scaled out is the resources. Because in a smaller the smaller area and in the pilot time we were sharing costs. Idea 42 through Global Innovation Fund through Idea 42 were like helping us in some costs, but now all the cost is for upon the government. So the issue of cost, and now we are scaling up. We need more material, more human resource, and so forth. So we need to continue building capacity to the teams, and also building more capacity to beneficiaries to be able to use the nudge, and the issue of tracking. On the issue of tracking, I'm also thinking beyond, if we can think of having a low cost and simplified way, like tracking using mobile and so forth. So we continue discussing and finding out what are the better ways of doing the nudges instead of the odd way. The thing is the same, but now you are trying to use the technology helping you to maybe to make follow-up, which is easier and that. So in this area, we need to continue rising or working closely with the behavioral team to discuss and see what kind of simplified ways or tools can be used in the same way, like the Ghanaian said, on the issue of contextualizing more the material we are having. We can even borrow from whatever Nadia was testing in any country, because every country has its own taste design. So you can borrow from Ghana to Tanzania, and Ghana can borrow from us. And also we can expand more and see whatever technology which can be useful to simplify us, because for us, our country is big. You cannot reach all 186 districts and all beneficiary in the country. You don't know what is going on there. So if you have a mechanism of getting feedback, if someone said, I want to build a house, to get a track, if it's real planning on it to achieve of building a house, or is just forget the goal, how can you reach that person? So that things, as you continue supporting us, please take care of it. And then the issue of finding other areas of support. Thank you.
Thank you, Tumpe. And again, I'll pass it to Shigato for any reflections and insights from working on a really wide variety of these projects.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you again, Christabel and Tumpe. Not an awful lot to add, except to say that I think one of the most, I think getting these, the resources that have been designed in different countries into as easily adaptable and customizable a form, which is something we're working on, will be really useful, because as Tumpe was just saying, there's so much that countries can learn from each other, because there are obviously certain common features to what has been tested, but there are also subtle differences, and sometimes what has been done in one country can be really helpful for the other. I mean, one thing I would say, which is, I don't know if that's a resource, but it's something that would be incredibly valuable, is just the ability for the different country governments and World Bank teams to continue to interact with each other. I think we had the recent event in Nairobi where all the teams were able to come together. And of course, we did a lot of presentations and formal discussions, but I think the really valuable part of that that I felt was, just the teams talking to each other, learning what the challenges were in different contexts, how different teams have dealt with them, and just getting new ideas. I think there were so many new ideas that came up about expanding the scope of the behavioral work that is being done to other parts of these programs, to adjacent programs. And that's something that would be really important to keep fostering. It's almost that the interaction itself is what leads to some of these things happening. So I certainly would like for us to be able to continue to support that in whatever way we can. Just sort of making those connections and enabling those discussions and the follow-up to those discussions to take place. But yeah, in terms of resources, I think just, as much as we can to make everything easy to use, easy to adapt, easy to iterate on, and so that eventually the teams, I think Tanzania is very much there where they're doing this, really a lot of it by themselves. We do have, we're pulled in from time to time, but there's really a wonderful ownership from TASAF, from the government, of how to take this forward, and similarly in Ghana. And so just being able to continue doing that would be fantastic. Thanks.
Great, thanks so much. We have one question in the chat box, in the Q&A box. What is the best way to approach potential government partners and establish trust? On this question, maybe I'll hand it to Tumpe first to answer from experience, and then we can see if anyone else has other reflections.
The best way to communicate to stakeholders on what the design you have, as I told you, you try to communicate with the stakeholders whom you are working with from the beginning. So in every step, they know what you are doing. And at the end, you have to louder your voice. Wherever you go, whatever you are doing, you just tell them every time when they see you, they see behavior nudges. So that's the only way you can make people get attention to what you are doing. But if you are not communicating, And at the end of the day, you are introducing them about the new things which they don't know. To government, especially African, this is very difficult because I have experience. I know when you are doing new things, people doesn't know what you are doing. Even here in the program, sometimes people can say, what Tumpe is doing? We don't know what she's doing. But if you are really communicating, it will be easier for them now to come and understand what you are doing, and be easier for you now to be aligned in whatever program you are doing. And when you are designing, you have to be very careful to come up with a nudge which is really in need of what people will, at the end, it will break through from whatever bottlenecks they were having. So if you joke, if you don't take serious with the design, at the end, you will not be able even to communicate because you don't know what you are communicating. It doesn't have any outcome to beneficiaries, the grassroots. So the key issue is from the design and the issue to keep informing them. At the end, it will be easier for them now to take up what you're doing. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Tumpe. And I'll open the floor to either Shigato or Christabel if you have any other thoughts as well.
I just wanted to briefly say that I actually remember the first time that we went to Tanzania just to sit in on a joint World Bank and other donor mission, to discuss the upcoming program. And we didn't know at that stage what it is that we were going to do. But that was the first time I met Tumpe, and one of the pieces of advice she gave me was, even if we don't know exactly what we're doing, go to the Director General and just explain even the basic idea, like what is Ideas 42, why are you here, what do you want to do? And that was really, really good advice, because I think we got a lot of support from senior management of TASAF all the way through this process. And, I think that wouldn't necessarily have been like, I was there for 2 days, so it wouldn't necessarily have been my top thing. Would be like, I want to spend more time talking to Tumpe and the members of the team, right? But I think she immediately realized that even if the Director General isn't going to be involved day to day, it's very important that he or she be kept in the loop, and that stood us in very good stead. So yes, exactly, taking people along from the very beginning, and I think we do this work because we believe that it has value, that it's something that is needed for the programs, and we try to align it as much as possible to what the program needs. And so communicating that all the time. And I just love Tumpe said, talk about the nudges whenever you can. And Christabel said, I've got a picture of I've got the savings box like in my office. Those are fantastic things, because I think those are conversation starters about, this can be difficult to explain to people. So having something concrete, having a concrete story that you can relate and that you use every opportunity to talk about is really valuable, because in the end, this goes beyond the work, the specific projects that we're doing together. It's about taking an approach that is beneficiary centered, that helps beneficiaries across a range of programs. And the more we can do that, the better it's going to be. Thanks.
If I just can add to all the very informative information so far, just very practical. One of them, I'll be honest with you, the name Ideas 42 alone, people don't forget it. Like as soon as we brought them in, we brought you guys in and discussed, it's like, what is Ideas 42? And conversations start around it. And so that has helped us, to be honest. So don't change your name. That's why. But also the other thing is incentives, right? To be very honest, I've been doing this work for a long time. That UK trip did it. And it wasn't just the fact that they came to learn something that was innovative and inspiring. It was just the opportunity actually to be in a different space. And so that is something that we apply as much as is possible and as much as funding can do. Take people out of their everyday space where there's so many problems that they can't see past the fact that, for example, cash transfer payments are not being made. Remove them from that space into another space and inspire them. It works. It really works. And then everything else that we said, bring people in from the beginning, let them take ownership, show them examples of where it has worked and why it's important. And I think we can continue to do good things. Thank you.
Thanks so
Okay,
much.
it's really good to know that getting all of those UK visas was really worth it, because boy, that was not easy.
Thanks so much. We have one question in the chat that I think would be great to touch on from Till Wicker. Digital technologies offer great opportunities for scalability of nudges. Are there plans to digitize some of the nudges? For example, the money pouch could be translated into labeled mobile money wallets. And what are the risks that may arise? Maybe I'll pass this one to Shigato first and then open the floor.
Sure. Yeah. No, I think that's a very good point. And I think, even as we worked with these programs, some of them have moved from being very physical in terms of like actual cash disbursements to doing more online. So wherever possible, I think we've been trying to design things, and as the questioner picked up exactly, that may be in a physical format right now, but that could be translated to a digital or some kind of virtual format in the future. There are some other projects that we didn't talk about today, which if you go to the Cash Transfers website that has been shared, you'll see where a lot of this was in fact done virtually or digitally, and we found that it's as effective. So it's really a question of, where is the program and what are their needs? Are they considering, moving some of this to a digital platform, in which case we'd be very happy to do that. Because as you pointed out, it has enormous potential for scale. Obviously, there are, some things one needs to think about there in terms of, access. Sometimes when you do things using mobile technology, it may be more accessible, for instance, to certain members within the household who may not be the ones that you're targeting with some of this. So there are obviously challenges there as well. But I mean, I don't know, I'd love to hear if Christabel or Tumpe have any thoughts about the specific programs they're on moving in a more digital direction.
Thank you. In the Ghana program, we've been working on digitizing for the last about over 5 years, actually. So essentially, our payments modalities are all digital. Registration is digital, like as much as possible to improve service delivery. We've changed things to digital. So one of the areas is, since 2020, it's also introducing mobile money payment options for beneficiaries. So yes, there could be opportunities in there. Funny enough, though, for me, the visuals, you can't take away from what visuals do. So as we look to, adapt to technology so we can go to scale, I think it's important for us to ensure that we maintain the visuals. People don't forget what they see, if it's, it's a picture in a text message maybe, but I think that would be really crucial. So yes, the opportunities exist. We've seen beneficiaries having choice as a result of being able to get their payments through mobile money. So exploring what to do there is really key. But I would like to really reiterate that as we do that, like a lot of things, let's not overly go to the other side. Let's also maintain some of the benefits of the traditional old school models that are very important. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Tumpe, do you have any thoughts you'd like to add on this question on your side?
Yeah, yes, like I said when I was explaining, using technology like digitization is also part of process that we need to think of. That's why I say it is important to know what kind of nudge activities can be digitized. Because some activities is the training, you need to go face-to-face to train beneficiaries. But there are some activities that can be digitized. So it all depends on what kind of the nudge and which activity and how can be digitized. Because digitization is also, even in the PSSN, we are digitizing, even saving group activities are digitized. They are getting fund beneficiaries through electronic payment. So we will see what kind of activity can be digitized. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. We only have a few minutes left, so I'll move towards closing us out for today. But just wanted to say a huge thank you to our panelists for joining us, Christabel, Tumpe, and Chigato. It was really wonderful to hear from all of your experiences. And I'll just, as we close, I'll just remind everyone, if you want to learn more about the tests and the results we've found, you can find all of this information on our evidence hub, cashtransfers.ideas42.org. And if you are interested in learning more about any of this, talking more about any of this, please feel free to reach out to Chigato and myself, and we would love to continue the conversation. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a great day.